first meeting of the Infrastructure Committee for this triennium. I'll just quickly start with an introduction, seeing as it's a new committee. So I'll introduce myself as Councillor Bartlett, the Chair. To my left, we've got Councillor Glenning as the Deputy Chair, Councillor Smith, Deputy Mayor Smith from Upcliff Wanaka. We've got Councillor Cox from Upcliff Wanaka and Councillor Ferguson from Arrowtown, Kawerau. I've also got to my right the acting GM of Infrastructure, Property Infrastructure Department, Tony Avery, and keeping us in line, Alex from Governance. I'd also just like to start taking my inspiration from Ferg's meeting the other day with just to put our thoughts to the team, to our colleagues in infrastructure departments in the North Island with the flooding that they're dealing with. They've obviously got lots to deal with in the next wee while, as well as all the other things that we all have to deal with anyway. So I guess we can remain vigilant as if there's any way, any method that we can help them if it becomes available. Apologies. We got any apologies for today? I don't.
Councillor Tucker is 10 minutes running late. He's caught in traffic. Right. Instruction time. Actually, he just texted to say he'll be here in 10 minutes.
He's having an infrastructure problem.
Yes. He wants to call the cyber about it. That'll be it, mate. He's doing some field inspections.
And my apologies, I do have to leave at about 1:30, so I'll slip out quietly when the moment arises.
It's not on my list, but do we need to do, oh, it is on the list, leave of absence applications? Do we have any of those to deal with? Oh, firstly, sorry, mistake. We need the resolution that apologies be accepted.
I'll move that.
In a second.
Yep, so Councillor Cox and Councillor Ferguson.
All in favour?
Aye.
So leave of absence requests.
I do, but I've done it with, I'm not sure it affects infrastructure, but I've already put it in with full council, but it's 20th of March to the 24th of March that week. Thanks.
No one else? No. We don't need to do a resolution for those.
No.
Right, declarations of conflicts of interest relating to anything that we're talking about today. No.
No, next.
That's good. No resolution required. We move on into the public forum. We have one person registered to speak today, Leon West from Tree Space, who's online, I understand. So you've got nominally 3 minutes to speak, and the floor is yours.
Great, thank you for letting me attend and present today. My name is Leon West. I'm a consultant project manager from Maestro Projects, working for my client Tree Space. So effectively speaking on behalf of them today is Adam Smith, the primary director for the company, attend. And yes, so understand I've received the proposed traffic restrictions with a couple of options from Ben Greenwood. And we've received that on, I think, Friday. I received that yesterday, along with a supporting report. And I'd just like to talk around that and what the proposed restrictions are. I think starting off, our preference is to not have a ban or any kind of restriction. It's an extremely heavy-handed approach that can cause significant financial implications and program implications for construction projects. And I'm not aware of any situation in New Zealand where that could be placed other than this floods that we've just experienced. So it's kind of comparable to that. So, but in saying that though, that the Coronet Peak Skewfield Road is our primary access point, so we care deeply for it, and we want to see a good outcome for everyone. And on that basis, if any exemption was or ban or exemption process was to be put in place, we'd be I'm very keen to see a time limit placed on it because of the financial implications that such a restriction or ban may have on a project. Just a way of a background too, that kind of ban and delay on a project could be significant in a contractual arrangement that could be in the order of $2,000 a day. And so in this report that's been presented, I think it's the cost of option 1, which is no ban, was placed in the order of $150,000. And I'd say that if a ban was placed on us, we'd have a more significant bill than that if it was placed. So I think the key thing is time, and in a contractual relationship with in a contract, it's just essential that everything flows. So have an open-ended exemption process would not really be acceptable or workable, and you'd probably get into a situation where you couldn't actually commit to a project, which should have flow-on effects beyond tree space in a small market. So I think that's important. The other thing I wanted to raise is that tree space is already undertaken to cart 20,000 cubic metres ahead of the Coronet Peak works. And that's gone into tree space. So that work's happened. Another important fact to mention is that the original resource consent, which was granted in April 2020, involved 100,000 cubic metres of cut to waste, which would have all been trafficked, taken down Coronet Peak Road. And we've subsequently revised the design to keep most of the material on site, other than the 20,000 cubic metres that's already been carted to the site. That's obviously excluding roading aggregates and materials, which will make up the bulk of the traffic movements. So that's traffic movements that are actually unavoidable. And then the limited earthworks season, so placing a ban and restricting traffic during a limited earthworks season has an effect on program beyond the months of delay, in that there's only a certain time frame during the year that you can undertake these activities. So if you say place a ban for 2 months, it doesn't have a 2-month delay, it has a full year. So I think that are the main points that I wanted to make, and that we're happy to work around it. As I say, we want a good outcome, but I think everyone needs to understand how significant this is.
Thanks, Leon. Does anyone have any questions for Leon while he's here?
I do actually, if that's okay.
Go.
Just, you know, the works that you're doing in other heavy vehicles might have an impact on that road, but equally, as you said, the economic impact could be quite significant and potentially more than the cost of a reseal. I'm just interested in whether tree space would be open to mitigation options. I mean, there are ways that the timing can work to limit the impacts on the road. But if there was an impact, would tree space be, if there was a more flexible approach taken and it did cause an impact, would tree space be open to contributing? I don't even know if that's a valid question, but I thought I'd ask it.
I probably don't have authority to act purely on that, but I think it's a difficult situation because we're sort of against having like the default position being a ban and then having an exemption placed. It should really be more of a reactive approach, as in if there's damage, then an exemption process kicks in, and then if that's not, then a ban. So sort of be in a different order. But we'd be more than open to undertake some of the recommendations, which was, I think, asphalt. I don't know if it's actually mentioned in this report, but in our EA, there's an engineering acceptance, which took the best part of a year to be granted. It didn't actually include asphalt upgrades on Coronet Peak Road. It was only shoulder widening. And I think if we were allowed to have unrestricted access, and even to the extent of the traffic movements that we've put forward, we could undertake to do the asphalt upgrade on Coronet Peak Road, and look at the temperature recommendations as well. We have weather stations on the site, so we could closely monitor that.
Thank you. That's great.
Just a quick one, Leona, to the chair. Just the amount of earthworks you said already done, you've reduced it down and you've done most of the major earthwork movement on the road, have you or not?
Yes, so, and I think that's another area in the report. They talk about it impacting 50 lots. It's more like 100 lots because there's two subdivisions that, there's another subdivision that it indirectly affects because the servicing is from tree space. So that's it's effectively 100 lot subdivision that it's impacting. And in terms of earthworks undertaken already, so that in this site, which is in Arthur's Point, we've stripped the site of or the majority of the volume of earth that had to be cut to waste. So that material was taken up Coronet Peak Road, probably realistically about a year ahead of any other consents, and placed in tree space. And then so for tree space, it's been originally it was a resource consent that was approved with 100,000 cubic meters. In that order, and I'm not sure if it's that was the exact number, but it was in that order of material that would be carted off site, presumably to clean fill off site down Coronet Peak Road. We've subsequently revised the design so there's no cut to waste. So it's all kept on site, and we've established around 8 fill sites on the site so that we don't have to cart anything off site.
Okay, thank you.
Question for me then, is that cartage, is that all within the site boundary then? Have you got roads, internal roading that you can cart on rather than taking it out of the bottom of the site, up Coronet Peak Road into the top of the site?
So yeah, the earthworks, the earthworks going forward will be internal. So the majority of the traffic movements wouldn't start until season. But the 20,000 cubic meters that was carted up Coronet Peak Road.
Any other questions?
I do have one that needs clarifying. If the earthworks going forward is internal, what's the pressure on the earthworks season? What are you bringing in that needs to be carted up the road? That would limit. Does that make sense?
So the earthworks season is imposed under the code of practice, and it limits earthworks between October and May. So the significance of that is if the ban is in place, which would likely fall within the earthworks season, which is when the temperatures, for instance, may be higher, that would be in the earthworks season where that's the only period in which we can undertake some of the earthwork, well, mostly pavement construction, but there's practical implications too, with like if our ground temperature is too cold. So if we were restricted, if our earthworks were restricted or cartage up the Coronet Peak Road during that period, we would effectively lose a year.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks very much, Leon. We'll move into that item. Yes, now. Actually, we've got a couple of things to do first. Yeah. So we'll move into that item shortly. First, before that, we have no matters lying on the table. First meeting of this training, and we have I've got our agenda to confirm. So confirmation of agenda, resolution required that the agenda be confirmed without addition or alteration. Nikki's waving that. And 1 second. Thanks. Thank you. All in favour of that?
Aye.
Carried. Confirmation of minutes. There are no minutes to confirm as this is the first meeting of the committee for this training. So then we move on to item 1, proposed traffic restrictions on Coronet Peak Road. We have Ben Greenwood here, who's written the report. Purpose of the report is to recommend that delegation is granted to the General Manager, Property and Infrastructure to implement traffic restrictions. Under the Council's Traffic and Parking Bylaw, 2018, the bylaw for a section of Coronet Peak Road to mitigate the risk of damage to new seal programmed for construction in late February 2023 in the event of exceptional heavy vehicle movements. So, Ian, over to you.
Just that we've got some amazing here as well.
Thanks, Simon.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just start by briefly introducing the report and covering the options. And I can imagine that there'll be some discussion around the expected mitigation or exemptions process, so I can explain a little bit more about that. So, yeah, firstly, the report relates to a risk that's been identified on Coronet Peak Road. QLDC completed a pavement rehabilitation project, which is the purpose of that is to rectify a poor road surface that's become a safety issue and has been up there for a number of years. The key concern with this is the damage could occur to the seal as a result of heavy traffic, and in particular there's another development which Leon's just spoken to, which will be adding a fair amount of construction traffic to the road. In terms of numbers, as Leon advised initially, it's not that many because they've worked really hard to complete the earthworks phase. And so they've done carted about 20,000 cube up the road. I just want to make the point that I'm not sure if anyone went up there 2 weeks ago, but before we milled the surface off and after those movements, there was quite a substantial blackness and damage to the road surface. So that's just really the nature of what we're trying to prevent here. We've been liaising with Tree Space since mid-2022 to sort of, once we became aware of their project and our project, and that's sort of part of the reason why they feel so hard to complete the 20,000 movements that have occurred so far. So just really want to acknowledge them for that, because I think that has really all those movements been over the whole road, and now we're working on fixing it. The project team, which is I'm sort of opinion for, we do everything we can within the bounds of the project to mitigate the risk too. So we are looking at what we can do with the chip seal surfacing design to manage that risk. So that design would have added polymers and other things in it at a small cost to council to put forward the best seal we possibly can. However, there's a residual risk that remains, and that's outside our control. Chip seal in its early life is very tender and susceptible to traffic stresses, particularly in hot weather. The key risk is binder softening, and that binder softens at a point of around 40 to 50 degrees. So the air temperature is much lower, it's in the order of 20 to 25 degrees when that binder is at that temperature. So the purpose of this report is to recommend the delegations given to GNP to implement controls if required, and that's quite a key point to mention, to restrict heavy traffic during the early life of the seal, and also in the second of the seal when it comes. So there's a limited time period, but it does have potential to extend into that period of time when the second coat seal gets laid to a year later. So there's two options in the report. The first is to not implement any restrictions, in which case the road can be used by any number of road legal vehicles at any time. So it's effectively business as usual, and there's not a lot we can do to restrict any kind of movements. The second option, which is the recommended option, is to apply a restriction under the traffic and parking bylaw to heavy vehicles if the risk factors become too high. If this option is selected, it's expected that parties completing high-risk movements would work with council, so parties such as Tree Space, to negotiate a set of conditions or the like that help to mitigate some of the risk factors. So the report that Leon mentioned, it was probably referencing a report that our engineers have produced and not shared with Tree Space. So we received that late last week, and I haven't circulated it here. It's more expected to be operationally used to assess proposals for an extension. And that report highlights risk factors such as temperature and other areas such as particular to Tree Space development, the recommendation to asphalt intersections beyond the edge line and out into the traffic line of Corrie Peak Road. So yeah, I guess that's sort of the rough framework which I set up here as an opportunity to attempt to mitigate the damage to the council project, but as Leon's explained, it will have some implications on the Tree Space development. And I might as well name sort of the number. It's 25 degrees is what we've received advice on, and that's the temperature above which we would recommend that there's no heavy vehicle movements. So it's not so much about controlling the actual number of movements, it's about when they occur and ensuring that they're not done on hot days. That's mostly the approach, I think. But it would come down to under the process recommend that it would come down to case by case with different parties as to how what movements they were doing, and yeah, whether it was of concern or not. So I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is if there's a tour company running a bike trailer, then it's probably quite unlikely to get caught up in the process. We're looking at larger impacts.
But would they still be classed as a heavy vehicle? Sorry, through which you can ask a question?
May I ask a question?
Thank you, apologies. How, if they're going to get something from the exemption process, how are they going to know a month in advance what they're doing? I'm just.
Yeah, that would come down to the sign. If the sign goes up on site, they would be expected to comply with the sign. I think the sign would only go up on site if the risk factors became high enough. So if we're actually moving out of hot weather period, hot weather season now, and I'm not sure how many days we're actually going to get that are considered risky. So there is still going to be some time, I think. And if parties who are running large numbers of movements, like the Tree Space development initially is expected to only have about 20% heavy vehicle traffic on the road, but at peak times could be as much as doubling the amount of heavy vehicle traffic on the road. So it's really later on, once they start running aggregate for internal roads, I think that we would be looking at the greatest risk.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so you've obviously been working well with the developer to, to come up with some measures and stuff like that. The suggestion that it's heavy-handed is not, is that correct, or is it just giving you guys the tools that you need to continue to work proactively with them? You're not, wanting to overly restrict them, but
That's right. Yeah. I'd say that without a restriction, we can't do anything about it, and so we're doing the minimum that we can to try and help. And we would be looking to work with the developer through the exemption process to understand how we can navigate the effects on them too. And so we've already received the advice from our engineers that the movements that they have proposed for their development are roughly aligned to sort of what we can accept. So it's more around when can they do those movements, and so Leon has spoken to that and advised that the timing is still going to affect them, but I think it's just something we've got to work around, and the number that we're going to be working to is roughly 25 degrees, which is, as there are a lot of days that, well, a lot of mornings every day that it's not 25 degrees yet. There are very few days that actually get to kind of that temperature in the year, so I'm not sure how, I can't comment exactly how it's going to affect them, but I believe that the recommended approach is the minimum we can apply to actually be able to do something.
To protect our asset and investment. And that's, I mean, I think this is the important thing, is that we're putting a considerable amount of money into this rehab, aren't we? And if we don't take some measures to at least try to control it, we're putting that investment at risk and incurring additional costs for ratepayers. That
Yeah, it's about cost, it's also about access. I mean, if that road did say fall apart, for example, there could be access issues. Also the dollar value, so the project's value is about 1.5 million, and the value named in the report for a resale was about 150k, but it's not obvious or clear. We can't guess what the damage might be or what the repair methodology might be. So I don't think we're comparing the kind of the 150k as a resale as being what you would do, because if the road flushes up and turns black or gets damaged, it's a case-by-case repair as to what you do, and it can actually have quite long-lasting impacts on the life of that project. So yeah, it is potentially more than 150k where the damage could be caused, but we can't put it.
And the disruption.
It should be much less too.
and the disruption, continued disruption. Yeah. Thank you. That's all I have. I apologise, as indicated, I'm going to have to duck away, but I do support the officers on this.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Just a couple of things. Did we get the legal advice about the legality of what we're doing? Has that been confirmed?
Yes, so that's been confirmed, and it resulted in a slight change to the options.
Okay.
So the way it's been presented has been confirmed.
On a bigger picture thing, we've never used this before. We've built a lot of roads, and or they've been greatly constructed in subdivisions and that hand over here. Why now?
It's a good question. I think in my view, it's just a number of sort of unfortunate things all coming together at once. It's one of our steepest roads. Well, it's quite a mountainous terrain, so the traffic stresses are really high. It's right on the border of when you sort of look at what sort of seal you apply to the road, you're just about to say this is steep enough to need asphalt, but not quite. So it's a very high stress environment already. And then with the council project and the development, both been reasonably substantial kind of projects. There haven't been that many council road rehabs recently that I could say were at a similar location with a similar risk factor that I'm aware of.
Okay. Yeah, hot day. So what if there's, say it's a cold morning and there's got me still see damage? What you've sort of put the threshold 25 degrees, but especially on an intersection, I don't know if they're turning off but screwing on ships. I've seen it happen on the streets. You know, it can actually cause some damages. So I was, how tight are you to the 25 degree threshold?
Look, it's a number that you've got to come up with a number to be able to make the process.
So if there was damage, if there was damage without outside of 25, you'd have to live with that.
It's a risk that council would accept. Okay. because we could say no heavy vehicles. That's just completely impractical, to be honest. So it's really what's a practical number, and that's the advice we've received. That the bitumen software.
Chair, last quick at the moment, the comment from Leon about asphalt. They said if prepared to undertake asphalt, is that for the whole road or just just for the intersection?
So yeah, so I believe my opinion is, and it's just simply my opinion, and I'm not sure. There's certainly no commitment by Tree Space. Yeah. that asphalt at those intersections should be put in place. And so that would be part of officers considering through the mitigation or exemption type process, whether that is able to be provided and offered.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand that we can operate in the tree space. I do have some sympathy for them because I think they need certainty to operate business. I know if it was some work that we were doing and there was a sort of delegation given to somebody else to do a blanket ban on something, and they promised to be collaborative, we'd still be struggling with the investment. So I think that's a worry for me that this is such a blanket. We haven't actually seen what came through last week and what tree space has seen. It would be nice to have that locked in.
Yeah. I could comment on that for you, Nikki. I have almost locked it in terms of signalling directly to them, because I'm conscious of this being all quite last minute and not wanting to have confusion. So I have said to tree space that the temperature number is 25, and that we would want to see those intersections asphalted. So that's probably roughly what the council officers see as being the mitigation required.
Would there be, given that, would there be, looking at how days and nights and so on work, are we missing an opportunity to put in place a day ban where there is some certainty then around what happens at night?
I think the really important bit to just hold on to here is that it's given the delegation to the GMP and we are committed to working with stakeholders to try and come up with a solution that doesn't mean we have to go through the restrictions. You know, that's a backstop. And if we can set a framework that everyone's comfortable with, you don't actually need to impose these restrictions. I guess from the officer point of view, the power at the moment sits with this committee to be able to grant that, and the committee only meets at a certain frequency. So it's trying to make sure that we've got the tool available to us if we fail to get to a satisfactory position with the various stakeholders involved. It doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to go down that path. I completely understand the point too around the commercial risk and uncertainty for any developers that might be affected by this, but we really need to be cognizant of that, trying to work with them and give them as much transparency to the risks as we see them and the available mitigants. That's how we're trying to manage that.
That's great, thanks. Look, just one more thing, and that's the other users that are going to be potentially caught up in this, and that's possibly my biggest concern, is that we're talking about the tour bus that happens to be a heavy purpose vehicle that didn't see the sign because they've been organised from elsewhere. How are we going to advertise it in a way that means everybody's captured and somebody doesn't take a bus or a tourist up there and have to turn around?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we have a reasonable understanding of people that use this road, so we are able to do targeted comms to those parties. There is the risk that people who won't be aware, and they could risk running foul of this restriction, that signage and the like, and notification through comms. So there's no way to manage that risk.
Yeah, I'd be really keen to see wide advertising on as many platforms as we possibly can that would capture those people. I mean, let's do some investigating. Sorry.
You know, I think what we're looking for is the authority to make some decisions within the operational context, and take the point we'll make sure we deal with Noel's team and get out to the various users to make sure that they are aware. But as we've identified, team do see it as being an important component to be able to restrict traffic. It's going to cause that serious damage to the road pavement. That's what it's about, but we fully recognise the need to keep businesses operating as best as we can. So it's within those sort of broad parameters, and it's very hard to tie it down to specific things here. That's that sort of general mix, but doing awareness will be as hard as we can make it. Although I boldly predict that no matter how wide we go with the consultation, somebody will say he didn't go. But that's, we always get that.
I think the reality is that we do not want to impose restrictions. That's the worst case scenario here.
It's a general rule around roads, you know, available for parties, but there are some instances. So.
Right, I have a couple of quick questions. So one of mine was about the advice you did from the consultant. Obviously, it sounds like it may have come in, you know, after this report was written anyway. Because when we discussed it in a workshop, you know, we were talking about vehicle movements, numbers of movements, weight restrictions. But So their advice is solely based on this temperature limit.
Not solely, so the consultant's been provided with, traffic counts on the road.
Right.
And also, development counts like tree spaces have shared with us their expected numbers.
Yeah.
So the consultant has looked at that,
They can accommodate it.
made an assessment that what tree space are proposing probably doesn't require numbers to be restricted, but that would be on the basis of the other recommendations being put into effect, which were say the 25-degree temperature.
Yeah.
There's a few other really minor ones too, but sort of those are the key ones.
Okay.
That I've explained.
With reference to the asphalting of the intersections, what's the increase in cost that would be associated with doing that from what's currently lit?
You can multiply 8 meters wide by 100 meters long to get the maximum. So it might be less, but that's probably the maximum by $50 a square meter times 2 for 2 intersections.
Right. So the asphalt is $50 a square metre more than the chip seal.
It would go over the top.
It's on the top, isn't it? Yeah, of course. Yep. Okay, so that's the additional cost. What thickness of asphalt is that?
It's recommended to be 35 mil thick DG10. I've just got to Excel it and then I'll give you 8 times.
We don't need too much detail, I guess. Yeah. It's for you guys to.
8 times 100. So it could be $40,000, but it could also be much less. Yeah. For a smaller area or a better price was negotiated.
Okay, and in the time frame that we're looking at, Tree Space and NZ Ski and associated parties are the main users of heavy vehicles on that road. But you've got a handle on what other ones there are on an average week through this time frame.
Yes,
Not very many. Or...
there's a wide number of parties, all with few vehicles each. So yeah, that's really an operational thing that we're going to have to figure out how we communicate.
Okay. The report also mentioned a permit system with a 1 month time frame, but under this temperature limit, you wouldn't need to operate a permit system, would you? Or
we would still expect to see users of significant heavy vehicles coming to us to discuss, and so we would that system would still be in place.
Okay. So you still need a
don't
permit to use it, right?
anticipate it requiring a month. Right. That would allow for, if say a developer agreement needed to be put in place for provision of asphalt surfacing, for just, hey, we've got these vehicle movements coming up the road, we're gonna comply with the 25 degrees. That's a pretty quick turnaround. So I think it's really just a contingency in case there's a more detailed agreement required to be formed up.
Okay. That's everything I had. Yep. Right, so no other questions.
Oh, sorry, just getting back to practicalities of, I don't know what stage the development's at. They got a subdivision plan approved, you know, for, yeah. So the streets, you know, what the streets are going to be constructed to, what standards and all that sort of thing in the subdivision?
We will, yeah,
Oh,
but we don't anticipate it.
I don't know whether they're going to be asphalt or chip seal or something like that. Okay. So, but they're at the stage of, are they at the stage of actually starting to construct? I should have asked them this, the internal streets and that, because I'm just looking at what's heavy traffic, you know, in the high temperature. A lot of the heavy traffic, I want to go do a lot of the jobs early in the morning because they're fishing concrete, stuff like that, and they're out of there. But the asphalt, when you're doing the streetscapes and all that sort of thing, must be an all day thing. I was wondering what's the schedule, or you've got any idea?
No idea. Look, I understand the parts of their works are also still being tendered, so I think they're still in the middle of it. But, there's still a significant amount to come. The only work that I'm aware of that's occurred so far is constructing some large sort of earthworks at the 2 entranceways, and then this hauling this 20,000 cut to waste up to fill a gully and up the top. I'm not sure what else has occurred.
So for your project, you stop sealing at a certain time of the year, and it will be done by May, is it middle of May?
No, our project will be complete within a couple of weeks.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but generally sealing, you don't do sealing in the winter, do we? Okay, cool, thank you.
And the time frame we're talking about is until the second coat is sealed end of next summer. So we're talking about a year between.
It's until it's beyond the second coat seal, but it's it's really risk based, so we're just going to make an assessment, and it can come down to the condition of the seal at the time, how it's looking, what the first coat looks like before the second coat goes over the top. So I wouldn't see it as extended more than a year beyond the date of constructing the first coat, the second coat seal. So it's a maximum of 2 years, but it could be less.
Just in time, I think, workshop in
No, we have to.
two.
Okay.
I'm
I've got
happy
to carry on.
to move.
Okay, well, shall I read the resolution? No more questions on it? No. Right, so the resolution is that the infrastructure committee, 1, note the contents of this report. 2, delegate to the general manager property infrastructure authority to implement the recommended restrictions as required under clause 14.1A of the traffic and parking bylaw 2018, the bylaw, and approve the exemption process to allow limited heavy motor vehicle movements during the period of restriction at council officers' discretion. Nikki's happy to move that.
I'm happy to move, yeah. I would like to just say a couple of words after. Does anyone want to say?
Anyone just second?
Just speaking to it, I think, look, it's a delicate balance here between, allowing people to get on with their business and protecting the asset. And I have confidence that our staff can do that well, but I would like to be kept kind of abreast of how it runs, how it's going, so that we can see, because it's over a long time period, so I think we can bring it back to workshops.
And are you happy to open that up to Leo? We're still online, and
Yeah.
if he's got any concerns via, his interactions with us, we'd like to kind of hear about that too. So.
Great, and if the comms can be quite wide as well, I think we need to capture all those accidental people who turn up. Thank you.
Am I allowed to make a comment, Mr. Chair?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, no, I just want to make the comment, just being on the Arthurs Point Community Association, and I just back up what Councillor Glenn, just keep me in the loop as well, and it allows me to pass information on through that medium for you, for council. Thank you.
Right, no other discussion on that subject. All in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Carried. Or any no against?
No.
Carried. Right, item number 2, Butler's Green retaining wall. The report has been green is here still, while Simon is with him. The purpose of this report is to present the options for the retaining wall between Butler's Green and Buckingham Street in Arrowtown. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you. I'll try and get through this one a bit quicker. I'm just going to really briefly summarise the options. And
I think you should take it as read.
Take it as-
Take it as read and just.
straight over to questions then.
Any questions?
I do.
Right. Really?
Yeah, I'm just interested in our heritage strategy and how that was applied to this. We've had some comments back from the community and representative on the Heritage Trust. So I'm just interested in the process, because it does look like we have options, engineering options, and that have been costed, and we're sort of looking at the cost of those and some confused community sentiment by the sounds of it. I'm wondering why we haven't done a heritage assessment of the different options, because I think I'm confused, and I think the community is confused. It's changed its mind because we don't have that information about the options.
Yeah, so that's a good question. The heritage assessment is part of the process, and it would be coming at the consent stage. So what we're looking to do is front foot this before we continue to spend money on an option that's been raised as a concern so far.
I guess for me, it's another question. I guess the resource consent process can be quite full. Right? If we go down that track, and we've already got Heritage New Zealand indicating that they're concerned with the preferred option, we could get quite tangled up if we don't front foot that assessment and put forward the right option for consenting. So that's my biggest concern, is that we haven't done that heritage assessment, and we could get tied up in a consenting process that takes a long time and costs a lot of money.
I'd be very surprised if the assessment wasn't ultimately able to be approved for any of these options.
So, is this a heritage listed site?
Yes, yes.
It is. Yeah. So that'll be part of any assessment. That's obviously what's come through, but we've also got a fundamental structural issue here that's got to be dealt with.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to maintain this for the public safety, and I think that also needs to come into it in terms of assessment of it from the heritage perspective.
Have we considered sorry, through the chair, have we considered a heritage strategy?
I haven't used it.
I'm just concerned about that. We have a heritage strategy in place. I think you're part of developing it, actually, Councillor Cox. Look, there is some concern that we're not considering that strategy. It's in place. It hasn't been mentioned in the report. And I think that's a real concern for me, because there are options for this. I mean, at the moment, I'm looking at it as a cost issue, you know. But there are options for collaborating with different groups, and we have the Waitakere Heritage Trust set up that looks at, takes on different projects that are difficult for council and other agencies to do, that can acquire funding from, you know, from elsewhere. And I don't know that we've really considered that.
There have been a few elements that have gone into that, in the sense of a couple, I think two or three workshops with community stakeholders, and during those workshops, an explanation that we would be looking to ensure that heritage aspect of the wall was considered. That hadn't yet been finalised because we haven't finished the design. So there was an intention to consider it, just hasn't been done yet, and that's via the look or the nature of anchors. Like for the repair of the wall, anchors are required. There's only so much we can do if we're going to go down a repair option.
Thanks.
Just through the chair, just wondering if I can, I'll make a couple of comments first. Being an Arrowtown Coverdale Ward Councillor, I was privy to a meeting of the APBA with affected parties where there was, after a fair bit of discussion, relative agreement to what's been recommended in the report. And it wasn't until maybe a few days after David Clark, well known for his work with Heritage, who made contact and has obviously gone home and talked about it and thought about it. And I called in on him the other day just to have a wee catch up. And he's just given me some bullet points. Will I be allowed to read those? Yes. These just the thoughts of David Clark. Butler's Wall in Arrowtown is a very significant heritage feature. It is protected both in the QLDC's Register of Protected Features and also by Heritage New Zealand. It has links to the Chinese settlement. I guess when I get to the end of it, it's just whether you guys have got a comment on that, that's all. So far, any assessments of its condition has been based on engineering assessments and not a comprehensive heritage assessment. It involves mesh, covering and pinning. First and foremost, a heritage assessment should be undertaken as to its heritage values and what can be properly restored, but also the implications of various remedial solutions. This has not been done. Dialogue needs to be undertaken with Heritage New Zealand and archaeologists and conservation experts. Any private owner of a heritage feature / building / tree and the QLDC is required to undergo a heritage assessment / archaeological report, arborist report. And council is not exempt from undertaking this process. It is accepted that engineers have met with Arrowtown groups regarding a solution. So I don't need to read the rest. But those are just some comments, wondering if you've got any comment on that from David Clark.
No, I think that's fairly accurate. You know, I would say what we're looking at here is under the options is an operational kind of response to come in and patch it up as it keeps falling down, or whether we do look back to a more structured approach, such as the full reconstruction of the wall. Either option 2 or option 3, which is the mesh and anchor option, or the reconstruction option, will involve that heritage process. So there's an archaeological authority, and it's required as part of the consent.
And just, if I can just make a comment as well, Mr. Chair, that, having sat on the Heritage Trust for the last 6 years, which includes the likes of David Clark and a whole host of others, some who are not involved with this project or this community, is that you do see how some things that are given up for ghosts can be restored and rescued. So this comment I'd like to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is kind of a slightly unusual report seen from, it's coming to my signature and that it doesn't recommend an option.
That's right.
And usually we're sort of fairly firm about this and then explain the reasons for that to the historic. The issue I suspect with option 3 is that's going to take some work to go through. We have no budget to then do whatever the work might be. And there is a risk of the wall, and I don't know what the risk is at the moment, if we had an earthquake or something, the wall collapsing. If the wall obviously fell down, we would just make some emergency work to fix it, and it might be a longer process. I'm just relating that because that's part of the issue of funds. And as I understand it, the original plan was to do just a patch up, and that's clearly changed in terms of the community view. So that's kind of outlined here, but it is, for me, it's a very unusual report and not recommending an option because of these very things we need to work through.
I just actually, I can wait. I just like to foreshadow that I'd like to propose a motion.
A couple of things,
And I
please.
can, yeah, so I think it's fine.
You've got any questions?
Oh,
Oh,
Right.
one more thing.
I'm going. I've read some of the reports, looked at all, heard what's being said here. Just a question on the ongoing maintenance. What's happening right now? You look at pictures, people say, oh, the vegetation hasn't been looked after and things like that. Is there room to do some more improvement on the looking after the vegetation and that around there at the moment without doing anything else? I'm talking, I know wall's still dangerous and have an earthquake, but if we have an earthquake, Christ, we might have a whole lot of other problems to worry about too. Well, what I'm leaning towards is I don't believe we should be doing, I'm leaning towards option 1, don't do any more until we have a heritage viewpoint and all that sort of thing, but do as much maintenance as we can. And structurally, if the road is putting more pressure on it, is there room to, I thought there was a big debate whether the road should be one way or two way and things like that. So that's what I'm leaning. It's not so much a question, it's just unless you've got anything you want to comment on those, on what I'm thinking there, that's all. And okay, and it might come back to it after heritage. People have a look at it and all that sort of thing. In 6 months' time, may come back. Then we'd have to go through a budgeting process and all that sort of thing. But hey, I just feel we're going to fire on here. They don't seem happy with the option we're proposing or that they're underway with. So I wouldn't proceed with it until we take a breath and sort out what's the best thing to do. I don't know, that's my view. Not really a question, sorry, Mr. Chair. But
My thoughts, I mean, the wall's obviously moving over time anyway, with or without earthquakes.
sorry?
The wall's moving, over time anyway, with or without earthquakes. So my concern is not so much, may well face an earthquake, but what's going to happen in the meantime. And I don't know if we want to be seen to be doing nothing to something that's changing unpredictably. The solution that's proposed, well, there's a few solutions, but the idea of the anchors seems to be a minimal maintenance repair. That's also reversible, which I think is important in heritage restorations. So it's not the option of rebuilding it completely and refacing it with the existing stone is so I think from my interpretation of heritage requirements is less appealing. The other concern that I had was that traffic still currently does have access across the top of that on the road on top, and whether that's an issue that needs to be investigated anyway further. And I know there's the option of one-way traffic to keep the traffic away from the front edge of it. But yeah, I mean, the wall itself, it's hard to know whether it's actually providing any retaining function to the ground behind it or whether it's just facing to whatever might be working behind it. It's hard to know. Yeah, I mean, I guess from what I've looked at and what I've read in this report, the option 2 seems to be, it has been already approved. It's budget for it. Arrowtown Village Association, we're in favour of it at one point, but it sounds like they might be less in favour of it now. it's still a solution to the immediate problem.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just to add to that, David Clark's comment was that if it went through a heritage process and they came up with, it's, you know, whatever they say they will abide by. That was David Clark's comment, and also the Arrowtown Village Association haven't been a part, haven't had any input into this. So there's two parts to the Arrowtown community from a committee perspective. But they said here in an email that we'd be aligned to David Clark's advice regarding Bubbles Walk. So thank you.
Do you mind if we just say who David Clark is for the minute?
David Clark is the director of the Lakes District Museum.
Lakes District.
QSM. Or it might be KSM now.
Lovely, thank you.
So,
Sorry, the only other comment I had too was that the options in the report, Stantec didn't, well, as far as I could see, they had anchors and plates or, you know, an arrangement of steelwork on the front. I didn't see anything with mesh on it at that point, but has that come up since that 2018 report?
Yes, yeah. So I think that might be part of the issue, is that mesh is being added to into the mix since the initial 2019 conversation for us. Yeah.
And what sort of mesh are we looking at? Is it a, sorry,
Steel mesh.
like a square reinforcing mesh or a hexagonal?
Right,
Right, yeah.
Initially it was recommended as being plastic covered as well, but I think we can live with it. Slightly shorter design life on the mesh and have it.
Black steel. Nikki,
I'm just looking at the time and
I know.
I would like to put a motion if that's.
Any other, no other questions to discuss? No.
So I'm putting this and it's, I don't want to do nothing, we can't do nothing, but we have to do the right thing, and anything that we do here is going to take time and it has to go through consenting. So I think we have a strategy, heritage strategy, we haven't considered it here. And I think that if we're going to do heritage assessment, it should sit before we get to consenting, it should sit at this level so that we have the heritage assessment in front of us before we make an option to progress, a decision to progress one option. So that's the reasoning behind it. It's a long motion. I've sent it to councillors this morning. I can read it slowly and I can also send it around. Point 1 of the proposed motion is note the contents of the report. Point 2, direct staff to undertake a heritage assessment of the wall, including its heritage values, what can be properly restored, and the heritage implications of options 1 to 3 in the report. Point 3, direct staff to consider the heritage strategy and consult and collaborate with all partners in the strategy, including the Whakatapu Heritage Trust. And point 4, direct staff to consider all reasonably practicable options within existing budgets for preventing the further deterioration of the wall, including reducing the road to Dudley's Cottage to 1 lane. So that is essentially, let's get a heritage assessment of the options that we have. Let's work with the partners that we've said we'll work with in that heritage strategy, and look at, in the meantime, doing what we can, including reducing water or 1 laning to prevent further deterioration. I don't know if I have a seconder or not.
I can second that.
Can you read it again?
I can read it fast this time.
I just need the end of point 3. I've got everything else down.
Okay, so that was direct staff to consider the heritage strategy and consult and collaborate with all partners in the strategy, including the Whakatapu Heritage Trust. Heritage Trust. Yeah, lovely. I just think we've taken an engineering approach to it, which is understandable. But I think we need to throw that heritage lens across the options.
Just to comment on some, we can do that as sort of kind of option one on doing small work and some sense. That's likely to chew up quite a bit of the budget, I suspect. It'll take time. In the meantime, we have to maintain that wall as best we can. And we may need to make some operational decisions around traffic flows on the top if we get into a situation where it is unsafe. I just need to make that call is my pick. So that's just a response to that very quickly. That would be my.
I agree. It's kind of a option 1, 2 hybrid.
Yeah.
We end up with a bit of a go slow as we work through and do the options system with that historical lens on it. So
We'd also.
We're effectively excluding option 3 with this motion because it's been, you've directed staff to work within existing budgets.
Well, I was going to say,
No,
let's be very clear. The existing budget will not achieve what potentially the outcome is, and I think we are going to need to come back potentially for further budget requirements. And if we don't get it as part of this annual plan, which is unlikely, frankly, you have to wait for the LTP, which is another year away. So there would be but that's just, I think we just need to be clear around that.
Yeah.
It's likely to be the LTP before we come back with further system, unless the wall falls down, obviously, which we're not planning to, but.
And there might be other sorts of funding that they can come up with too. So just a quick question on, do we have staff that do heritage assessments or how does that work?
no, that would be outsourced.
Okay, that's right.
Yep, we'd have to do a bit of work. And so that will chew up.
But it will incur a cost.
Yeah,
I
okay.
mean, my sense is this has evolved over time. So my sense is has evolved over time as the walls start to fall down, people are reacting to that, and clearly people want us to do more, which we can do, but it's going to take time, probably more budget, and we need to be more of that. But in the meantime, if we need to make operational decisions, because they're all, as I was saying, then we won't be coming back to the plan, we'll just make those operational decisions if we need to.
Yep.
Just from a safety point of view.
No other comments on that? We need to read that, so that's our new resolution. Take it.
Does that make sense too?
Well, I just as a note, it would be very handy to get those in advance of the meeting, because then we can read through and it makes it easier for us to also be able to provide some useful comment back. And if you've got alternative resolutions, my request is if you can circulate that to everybody and then governance has got it, you don't need to do that, everyone's got it. We can also consider it and go, here's the implications of it, so it's just a.
No, thanks, Tony. Normally I would, it was 11:47 and I guess my brain was I was running.
I don't think I got it.
I'm thinking of,
Apologies.
News to me.
anyway, so if we take it as, we can, let's not read it out. And do you want, Nikki, should we make Nikki read it out again?
Oh, you can, I've got it written if you'd like to read it as part of this. So it's number 1 and then 2 starting there.
Our resolution is that the infrastructure committee, 1, note the contents of this report, not 2. 2, direct to staff to undertake a heritage assessment of the wall, including its heritage values. It can be properly restored, and the heritage implications of options 1 to 3 in the report. Number 3, direct staff to consider the heritage strategy and consult with all partners within the strategy, including the Whakatapu Heritage Trust. Number 4, direct staff to consider all reasonable practical options within existing budgets for preventing the further deterioration of the wall, including reducing the road to Dudley's Cottage to 1 lane. We've got a mover and a seconder. All in favour?
I'm just looking at the way I've worded 4, which could be considered that you could do other things. And what the intent of 4 is to look at methods such as 1 laning, fixing broken water pipes, and removing any vegetation that might. So that was not. I was not intending that to extend towards using the 600,000 for. And I don't know how I can amend that to.
I mean, I'm happy to note that in the minutes officially.
Okay,
Like
if that's sufficient. Thanks, Alex.
So not to extend to anything further than vegetation, fixing pipes and 1 lane.
Yeah, thank you.
And then you want to do a vote?
All in favour?
Aye.
Against?
carried. And that brings us to the end of our business. So I declare the meeting closed at 2:05 PM.